Welcome to another edition of Politics and Random. Egberto, Willies, your host. Today we are honored to have the one and only Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota. How are you doing, Keith?
Oh man, it's a pleasure to be here with you, brother.
Let me tell you something. I am so sorry that I just missed the panel that you're on. What were the major topics that you're covering that people need to hear?
Well, it was a panel on the critical nature of racial solidarity, and Kim Crenshaw, the author of Intersectionality, an expert on critical race theory, was talking about how in the aftermath of George Floyd, where there was an outpouring of racial solidarity, then there's this backlash against diversity, equity, inclusion, against ESG, environment, sustainability, and governance, against affirmative action in general, against all types of things to make our society a more equitable, inclusive society. And there's just general backlash. In fact, in May, Trump said he thinks America's too anti-white, and he wants to make sure he stamps out that is what he thinks needs to be done to bring America together, is to make sure that he doesn't care about racism, sexism, none of that. That's his primary focus. So what that means is that he interprets DEI, trying to make America more inclusive, as somehow a threat to the majority, which of course is untrue. This is something that was said in the 1890s. Racist people then would say black people voting somehow was anti-white. Integrated schools, they would say, are somehow Negro domination. This is an old trope, and people know that it's a lie. But for people who are insecure, wondering what's going to happen to them next, suspicious and doubtful of foreigners, of people of color, maybe this kind of movement can catch fire. And certainly Trump is not the first one who's tried to use racial antipathy and hostility to divide Americans and ride into political office. So that's what the panel was really all about. We had Justin Jones, who's a representative from Tennessee,
right.
Brilliant young man who really stood up against gun violence. And then as the reaction was that he was thrown out of the Tennessee state legislature. Imagine that. Incredible. Only 3 people went to the well and said, this is wrong and I'm not going to stand for it. And only the 2 black ones got thrown out of the legislature.
Right.
And then he got reelected, and now he's on the move. So, and then we had Tim Wise, who is author on racism and the centrality of how racial division has really split our nation apart.
He's a bold guy in some of the topics that he covers, actually. Your face.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell you this. That's one way to look at it. Here's another way to look at it. When stating the obvious is considered somehow radical, then maybe the society has to look at itself, right? So Tim Wise made a number of good points. One of them, though, was that, hey, look, white people have also been part of the anti-racist movement.
Right.
We don't know who they are because history doesn't lift them up.
Right.
History doesn't lift up William Lloyd Garrison. It doesn't lift up Viola Liuzzo. It doesn't lift up Reverend Reeb. It doesn't lift up these people who fought for a multiracial society. So when we say we need to teach CRT or we need to teach racial history, a lot of white people say this is divisive because you're making white people look bad. Well, Tim's saying not necessarily. A lot of white people were against racism.
Right.
And so maybe we need to teach about who they were, what they did, and the sacrifices that they made, so that kids learning the lesson can say, no, I identify with this person who was against slavery, against Jim Crow. I identify with that person. Like Wilberforce.
Right.
Was a man who stood in the was a British political leader who was against slavery, right, and helped to bring about Britain's exodus from the Atlantic slave trade. But we don't know these people. And so he was saying, if you're feeling bad because we're talking about racism, that means you must identify with the racists, because they're not the only ones in the story, but that's the only ones you know about because you won't let us teach So that was a very important point that he made.
I mean, you just brought an important context. That's a very important context.
Yeah, man.
Now, let me tell you, I think everybody remembered that you are the Attorney General in Minnesota. You're
Sure.
the person who took, I mean, I don't think there was an Attorney General who could have handled the case like you did with,
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
Well, yeah, George Floyd was murdered, May 25th, 2020, just about 4 years ago. And let me tell you, I think there's other good attorney generals who could have done a good job, but it happened in my state, so I was up to bat.
Well, let me. I want to give you more kudos than that.
Okay.
I think the calmness with which you handled it and the straightforward with which you handled it prevented a lot of chaos that would have otherwise happened.
Well, let me tell you, Egberto, I spent 16 years as a trial lawyer doing criminal defense.
Right.
I know the ins and outs of federal court, state court, appellate court, all courts. I did civil rights cases where I brought lawsuits against members of law enforcement who used illegal, excessive, and unreasonable force against civilians. I know what it means to do these cases. I even lost some cases.
Right.
And so, in fact, I'll tell you a story. Back in 1998, a young black man, 15 years old, was shot in the back by a Minneapolis police officer. He was unarmed. We brought a lawsuit against that officer, tried him in front of a jury and lost.
Wow.
That happened 2 blocks away from where George Floyd was murdered.
That's new, yeah.
So here's what my point is. I thank people for the kind words they say about me and the role I played in the George Floyd case. But I also learned the hard way. I learned the hard way. And so when this came up, I knew the press was going to try to demonize George Floyd.
Right.
I knew that we needed to pick a great jury. I knew we had to have great themes. And I knew we had to have a great team. So
That you had.
what I did is I set about using everything that I knew, all of the scars and the bumps and the bruises I acquired along the way, and I brought them to bear in this moment. And for anybody listening, I'll say, look, your moment your number is going to get called. There's going to be a time, maybe it'll be in the public, maybe it'll be in the private, who knows, when you have to stand up and be counted. And I ask you, just remember every tough lesson you ever learned to help you rise to the occasion in that moment, because that moment's coming, because it comes for all of us.
Democracy in danger. How do we win 2024?
Well, one thing we got to do is we got to focus on what the people need. Too much focus is on, the glamour and the likability and the well-spokenness or poor-spokenness of the candidates. At the end of the day, one candidate is for promoting racism, division. One of them thinks that nonviolent, peaceful protesters are the same as the Klan and the Nazis. One of them calls countries where black and brown people come from shithole countries. One of them called for the execution of the Central Park Five. One of them was personally sued for racial discrimination in his housing. This is, as we know, is Trump. And one of them has a record of supporting black causes, helping our country arise to the true meaning of liberty and justice for all. And so let's focus on that. Let's focus on who's trying to bring down inflation. Let's focus on who's trying to move our country forward in terms of a ceasefire, Middle East peace, and who said finish the job when it comes to the Middle East. So I think we're focused on the wrong things. We're focused on the likability, the glibness, the articulateness of the candidates. And these all things matter, but they don't matter more than what these candidates are going to do for your family and you. And if you're a woman and you say, well, I think Trump is so funny and so great, I'd like to be able to control my own body, but I'm going with the guy who's going to take my rights away because I happen to think that he somehow is better spoken and looks better on TV. I think that's bad decision making. And I would say that you should go for who's going to help you.
Absolutely.
Regardless of all that other superficial stuff.
Keith Ellison, Attorney General, Minnesota, thank you so kindly as usual
My
for your
man.
prescient statements, my brother. Thank you very much.
Egberto, my man.
Estamos bien, hermano.
É um placer conocerlo.
There you go. You did it again. You did it again. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.